All right, good morning. Let's try this again. My Facebook Live is not making me happy today. It doesn't want to record me. So hopefully I am live now, and I should be able to see comments and questions as they come in. And I wanted to take a few minutes today to follow up on a great presentation that I did this past week for PMI Southern New England chapter. And I also did a class for them, an emotional intelligence class. And I had some questions, some Q&A that we didn't get to, unfortunately, during the session. And I was looking through, I'm like, wow, these are really, really great questions. I thought, let me make a video about it and still answer them. And so a little bit of background here. Emotional intelligence to me is one of those incredibly important skill sets or set of competencies that any leader should really be looking to refine. It really changes the dynamic of a leader the more emotionally intelligent that they are, and they can really leverage these competencies. And it's something that's very personal to me because I actually struggled with it. I know, shocker, right? I struggled with it early in my career and actually had, I jokingly call it the big intervention, where I was actually sent away to emotional intelligence training because it was, I was in need. I was in desperate need. So anyway, it's always been a personal thing to me, and it's something that I try to pay it forward because it did have such an impact in my career and in my life. And so that's kind of the scoop. So I'm going to pull up these questions that I had from some of the folks that attended the session last week. And you guys can feel free to jump in here as well if you guys have any questions. I know we've got some folks viewing, so if you have any questions, let me know. And way to start the day, Holly. Thank you. Looking good. This is surprisingly gorgeous, considering that, not that I think I'm gorgeous, but considering that I got trapped in an airport yesterday. I was in San Francisco airport for many, many hours, ironically not due to the nor'easter that I experienced on the East Coast. So ironically, I was stuck there, so very little sleep. But I want to walk through these questions. They are fantastic. Let me try to split my screen a little bit here so I can still pay attention to you guys. All right. So first question coming up is from Julianne, and she had asked, what's the best way to develop emotional intelligence? And the best way, honestly, is to recognize you need it. That's the first step. The whole thing, the first step is admitting you have a problem. That's the first thing, is you want to understand what the competencies are. And it's pretty easy when you break it down. It really looks at four aspects. The first is self-awareness. How well do I know my emotions and why I'm having my emotions? The second aspect of that is the self-control. Can I then control those emotions? And then we go into how well do I understand the emotions of others? And then what can I do to enhance or understand or have empathy for those? So I'm going to pause 1 second here. Hold on one moment. I have my printer going off in the background and it's driving me crazy. Emotionally intelligence right there, right? So best way to develop is first to understand the competencies and then look to practice it. And maybe it's by isolating one thing. Maybe it's, and I always like to give the example because this is something that everybody struggles with, which is road rage, right? You're on the road, somebody makes you mad, you do something, you flip them off, you make a mean gesture, you say something you wouldn't normally say. That's a core emotional intelligence attribute, that or unintelligent attribute right there. And so start by questioning yourself in those situations, those ones that are the most heated, that you tend, maybe it's dealing with an ex, maybe it's dealing with somebody else, maybe it's something that, okay, I know this particular person when I interact. So find what your hot buttons are, and then work on it. The other thing I would say to Julianne's question, what's the best way to develop emotional intelligence? The second thing I would say is ask people around you, what they see and how and make sure you're asking people who are willing to be honest with you. If you ask your best friend and she's going to tell you or he's going to tell you, hey, you're amazing, obviously that's not valuable. So really kind of seek out the feedback. All right. Jason asked, how do you passively leverage EI, emotional intelligence. What's the magic Jedi trick? No one will know you're using it, but you are. Great question, Jason, on that one. So how do you passively leverage EI? To me, a lot of it comes into pausing, and Holly's going to laugh at that one. Pausing, the magic of the pause. Pausing in a situation where you know emotions are getting heated. So the first thing is don't talk. Take a deep breath, pause, really assess the situation that's going on, and then smile, stay calm, keep your voice calm, your breath even, because what you're trying to do is you're trying to counteract the fight or flight response that you're in. And so you want to be able to give yourself some good oxygen flow, some peace, and just give yourself a minute. So the magic Jedi trick, Jason, to me is pause. Give yourself a second. If it's appropriate, you can even walk out of the room for a second. I've learned to do that. You know what? Right now, I'm just not in an emotional state to deal with this, so I'm going to just take a minute. So to me, that pause, it would be my magic Jedi trick. And again, something that you have to remind yourself of. All right, Dave asked, how do you deal, where did it go? Come back. How do you deal with the emotionally unintelligent person to get them to be a team player? Well, Dave, hate to tell you, but you can't change other people. It doesn't work. The best that you can do is protect yourself and the people around you from that emotionally unintelligent person. If you are in a situation where you can build a little bit of a trust relationship with them and then perhaps be able to give them feedback during a non-heightened emotional situation. You don't want to, like, in the middle of a blow up, be like, man, you lack emotional intelligence. You need to, calm yourself down. That's not going to work, obviously. So if there's a way to develop a relationship, Dave, with that person, that they can start building some trust, and maybe it's by kind of turning the tables and saying, hey, Mr. Problem, I'm really working on my emotional intelligence. Here's a little bit about it. And I would love for you to give me feedback when we interact, especially in stressful situations. So that gets him thinking about it in a way that's not making him think you're targeting him, but it might start to plant the seeds a little bit. And when he sees you're working on it, then he might be inclined to work on it. All right, so Scott, then another question we have, Scott, what tips do you have to remap habits? Okay, habits we know take time, and it's little tiny things, and I actually shared a couple of these in my class this week that I use. So I use three main techniques, I would say. The first one is, we talk about body language and incongruency with body language, right? If I'm saying words that seem nice, but my face or my body language is saying something else, that's incongruence, right? And so I know I have this thing, okay? This is a family trait. We're very serious, studious, or whatever. There's actually a name for that. It's called resting bee face. I look like I'm mad half the time, even though I'm not. And so one thing I've learned is I kind of give myself almost like a visual, like a physical cue on my face. If I know I'm interacting with somebody and it's a situation where emotions are getting heightened, I know my tendency is to go like this. I give myself kind of just a little touch. It reminds me just to relax my face. Silly. The other thing I use, I have bracelets that I use, or some type of jewelry or some type of an item that kind of centers me and allows me to stay focused on that. My word for this year is strength. And so if I'm in a situation where I'm getting overwhelmed, to me, I kind of have the visual reminder right there that I'm stronger than the situation. And then the third thing I would say to remap habits is obviously repetition. But the other thing I would say too is put yourself into a situation. Let's go back to the road rage thing, because that, like I say, is so common. And I am the ultimate queen road rager. I know this, or I used to be, I should say. Hopefully. One thing that I also do is I create a story in my head. So let's say somebody's driving in the left-hand lane and they're driving slow. That's one of my biggest issues. I hate that. I will then create a story in my head. Oh, this poor person that's in front of me, they've had a really bad day and they're actually fearful of cars merging on. Maybe they were in an accident one time when a car was merging on. And so for them to feel safer on the highway, they like to drive on the side. Now, all of a sudden, I have a little bit of a story with the person. I've humanized them, and I feel bad for them. I have some empathy for them. So when you're remapping habits, that's one thing, is come up with stories or come up with little triggers that give you that reminder. And honestly, emotional intelligence is an everyday habit. This isn't something like you take a class and you learn about it, and then you're like, oh, okay, now I'm emotionally intelligent. It doesn't work that way. It is a constant struggle that you're working on. It's something that you're always looking at doing. Books that you recommend, Esther asked that, and I like any of the books by Daniel Goleman. Goleman is kind of the, after Salovey and Mayer, who are very technical and medical based, Goleman took it and made it a little bit more practical. So anything by Daniel Goleman. Dave asked what made me decide to start teaching EI, and some people know this story, some people don't, but I had a major meltdown at work, and it was bad, and I pretty much almost ruined my career in about a 30-second to 45-second window. And thankfully, someone, my boss, had enough faith in me that he gave me the opportunity. I had two choices. I could either get fired or I could go away to emotional intelligence training. And I had to go away for 2 weeks, come back, work on what I learned for 4 weeks, and go back for another 2 weeks. I was impressed the company wanted to invest in me. And at first I was angry and bitter and blaming everybody else. But then once I got in there, it helped me so much. It made the difference in my career. So teaching it, if I can pay that forward to even one person, I can rest easy. Couple more questions here that we have. Norm asked, I believe that building relationships with my team members is significantly more important than the project work itself. Do you have any thoughts on this? Well, yes, actually I do, and I would agree with you. And Norm, I was not like that before in my life. I was all about the work and getting the work done, and that was my primary focus, was just get the job done, get the job done. And the people to me almost were obstacles. Now I see my people as my stepping stones. They're the people that we're going to do it together. We're bringing it together. The stronger my relationships are with my team members, and the more I can lift them up and empower them and allow them to be self-organizing, and I'm a big fan of servant leadership, the better the work. The work then just happens more naturally. And when there are issues, we are able to work through them. Having a people focus over a task focus, especially in today's market, in today's environment where the pace of change is so rapid, it's necessary. It's critical. It used to be, oh, you know, our work every day, day in, day out was the same thing, and we knew what to do, and expectations were there, and if you didn't meet expectations, then you got fired or you got written up or whatever. Today, there are no real set expectations anymore for most fields. So you have to be able to adapt. You have to be able to work with each other. All right, let's see. Pete asked, what is the best means of handling a hot-headed sponsor? And my very first response to that would be, don't respond to don't handle the hot-headed sponsor. Breathe, take a deep breath, maybe give some type of acknowledgement. Do not respond in kind, do not react up to that sponsor. Don't contribute even if they attack you. If it gets to a point where you feel like you're kind of being attacked, then you walk out. And you say, you know what, I'll come back when we can discuss this clear. Not when you're calmed down, but when we can discuss it in a better environment, better time. Separate yourself from it. Do not rise up. Do not try to calm down. The worst thing to do, I feel, when somebody is in a massive fight or flight zone, or in that big, I want to rip someone's head off area, the worst thing you can do is say to them, you need to calm down. Like, talk about putting a little bit of fuel on that flame right there. So you don't want to necessarily try to intervene when they're in that state. The best thing you can do is keep a calm energy. And if you can't keep the calm energy in the interaction, then separate yourself from the interaction and then go back later. Now, when you do go back later and have further conversations with the sponsor, do not make them feel bad about it. We're all human. Just say, you know what, you can say something like, I recognized at the time it was probably not the most conducive environment for us to have this dialogue, you know, or something like that, but you do not have to blame them or anything like that. All right, got a couple more here. How can you get unstuck in a problematic work relationship using emotional intelligence? So Pam asked that, Pam Titus asked that. And Pam, I will tell you, and you may have heard the story because you were at that chapter meeting. I had to do a lot. And it really starts, if you're in this problematic work relationship, it starts with you. And again, it's the self-assessment and what's my role in this. I had my nemesis, her name was Catherine, and I had to really separate myself from it, and start looking at her, number one, as a human being, and having empathy for her, understanding why did I react so strongly to her? What was it about her that pushed my buttons? So I had to get us into that more human relationship side versus this work relationship. The other thing, Pam, I would recommend is if you're able to spend some out of work time with the person, hey, let's grab a beer after work, or hey, do you want to take a walk around the campus? Something that breaks you out of that zone a little bit and allows you to connect personally. Emotional intelligence doesn't solve all the world's problems, unfortunately, although thinking of that, boy, don't I wish some of our leaders today had emotional intelligence? Wouldn't things look really different right now in our society if they did? We won't mention any names, of course, but so Pam, you got to recognize that you can't change everyone. There might be some that you have to learn to separate yourself from. All right. And then one last question here from Ross. Ross asked, "What are tricks and tips for keeping me aware of emotional context?" Ross, I gave a few at the start of this. Like I say, cues to me, I have a physical cue of touching my face if I know I'm like doing one of these. I have a visual reminder to me. But then I also just try to create stories around the people that are frustrating me. And I try to come up with something, and you may have heard the example they've used of, you're driving down the road and somebody goes flying by you and they almost run you off the road and you're furious and you think, oh, if I could just get my hands on that person, I'm going to teach him a lesson because that was so unsafe. And then you realize that they were on their way to the hospital because their child had been injured and they were trying to get to their child. Whew. Talk about changing the dialogue there all of a sudden, especially if you're a parent, you're like, oh yeah, I would have driven like crazy too, right? So try to humanize, I think is the best thing when we talk about coming up against those boundaries. So those are my questions there. Yes, you're absolutely right, Holly. You cannot calm crazy. You got to, and the more you step up into it, the worse it gets. And like I say, I am the queen of this. Like I say, I will fight anyone, any day, toe to toe. And I've had to really learn to back that down and recognize that, first of all, it's not worth it. It's not worth it. I think the other thing I would say with some of you guys on here that have kids and stuff is to recognize that everything that we're doing as parents, they are seeing that. And that is their frame of reference. And when I talk about my big intervention that happened with emotional intelligence, I thought my hot-headed attitude was perfectly normal because that's what my parents had modeled to me. So my frame of reference was that is normal, it's acceptable, it's appropriate. If someone's not performing the way they're supposed to at their job, you can go off on them. You can call them names. You can do that because that's what my parents taught me. And so we always have to kind of think about what is that impact that we're having on our children and then put it into the context of being a leader in any type of an environment. What are other people seeing you do? If you have a team, is your team seeing you go off and be unstable, or, which personality is coming in today? I used to have my team kind of had that impression of me, okay, what Belinda's going to show up today. And so being consistent in my behaviors and being thoughtful are kind of the key parts of that. So anyway, emotional intelligence, I highly recommend it. Daniel Goleman has multiple books out. Actually, his newest one, I'm looking around because I have them somewhere. They're over there. Is Social Intelligence. And like I say, I think that we need to all take a pause. We love our pauses. Pause. We need to pause. And if everybody in this country could just take like a 3-day emotional intelligence class, and then we could all get back together as a country and work through all of this stuff and recognizing at the end of the day, we all want the same things. I think this country would be way better off. So Belinda Goodrich for president with a premise of emotional intelligence for everyone. That should be the new qualification for a candidate for presidency or for any type of government. Find out what their EI score is. All right, guys. Well, thanks for joining me. Yay. I love seeing everybody on here. Very, very cool. So if you have other questions, certainly let me know. And have a great day. Happy Friday. I'm out of here. Bye.